He posted on social media, why do women always make us the villain? Right after I asked him not to go on a weekend camping trip with his college buddy, I didn't comment, just changed my relationship status to single. He called me 31 times that night, but I was already out with Nicole, getting wine and perspective. I'm 36 years old, and I need to get this off my chest because I'm still processing what happened. 6 months ago, I thought I was planning a wedding with the love of my life. Now, I'm sitting in my own house, watching him frantically text me from his friend's couch while his life unravels, and I feel this quiet sense of relief washing over me. Let me back up. Brandon and I had been together for 5 years, engaged for 8 months, with a wedding planned for next spring. We weren't perfect, who is? But I thought we were building something real. He was stable, ambitious, made me laugh during those Sunday morning coffee runs. I was ready to make it official, start thinking about kids, the whole suburban dream. Then Chad happened. Or re-happened, I guess. Chad was Brandon's college roommate, the one he'd roomed with for 3 years at State. The one whose name still made Brandon's eyes light up with this weird nostalgia whenever someone mentioned the good old days. He'd moved back to our area in March after his divorce was finalized, all about rediscovering himself and living authentically. And suddenly, he was everywhere. Guys' nights that stretched until 2 a.m., workout sessions at 6 in the morning. Oh, Chad's coming too, to our couple dinners, where he'd monopolize the conversation with stories about his journey and how marriage had trapped his spirit. First red flag, Brandon started questioning everything about our relationship. Not directly, but these little comments. Chad says I used to be more spontaneous. Maybe we're moving too fast with the house renovations. Do you think we're too settled for our age? Second red flag, the sudden lifestyle changes. Brandon, who hadn't touched a camping tent since college, was suddenly all about weekend adventures and connecting with nature. He bought hiking boots, expensive ones, and started following those insufferable Instagram accounts about van life and minimalism. Third red flag, I became the problem in every story. When Brandon came home late from Chad's career coaching sessions, it was because I'd been clingy in my texts asking when he'd be home. When I suggested we have one weekend to ourselves, I was being controlling and not supportive of his friendships. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in August. Brandon mentioned, super casually while loading the dishwasher, that Chad had invited him to go camping in the Adirondacks for a long weekend, just the two of them. Guy time, he said, not meeting my eyes. Chad thinks I need to reconnect with who I was before all the domestic stuff. Domestic stuff. Like our life together was some burden he'd accidentally wandered into. When? I asked. This weekend. We'd leave Friday after work. This weekend, our weekend. The one where we were supposed to pick out wedding invitations and visit the venue for the final walkthrough. The weekend I'd specifically requested off work and arranged childcare for my sister's kids so we could babysit and practice being parents. Brandon, we have plans this weekend. I know, but Chad's going through a lot right now. His ex is being difficult about the custody schedule, and he needs support. What about the wedding stuff? He finally looked at me, and there was this expression I'd never seen before, resentment, like I was the unreasonable one. It's just invitations, Mel. We can pick them out next weekend, or you can just handle it. You're better at that stuff anyway. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I'm not comfortable with you going away this weekend when we have commitments. See, this is exactly what Chad was talking about. What do you mean? You're being controlling. I'm allowed to have friends. I'm allowed to have a life outside of wedding planning and mortgage payments and whatever timeline you've created for us. The timeline I'd created, not the timeline we'd built together, apparently. I stayed calm. I've always been good at that, probably too good. I'm not trying to control you. I'm asking you to honor the plans we made together. That's what partners do. He rolled his eyes. Actually rolled them like I was his mother telling him he couldn't go to a party. Fine, he said. I won't go. Happy? But he wasn't happy. He was pissed. Passive-aggressive pissed. Silent treatment all evening, slamming cabinet doors, sighing dramatically every time I spoke. The full performance. I went to bed early Friday night because I had a presentation to prep for Monday. I woke up Saturday morning to an empty bed. His hiking backpack was gone. So was his sleeping bag and his weekend bag. An hour later, I saw his Facebook post, a photo from some gas station, him and Chad loading up Chad's Jeep with camping gear, both grinning like teenagers skipping school. The caption, "Sometimes you have to choose adventure over expectations. Real friends support your growth. #live, authentic, #best life. Sorry, not sorry." The comments were already rolling in. Chad's likes from his divorced guy friends. "Yes, King. Live your truth. Don't let anyone dim your shine." But it was Chad's comment that really got me. "Proud of you for choosing yourself, bro. Growth requires courage." I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, just staring at my phone. I wasn't angry in a screaming, throwing things way. It was something colder. The moment you realize you've been making excuses for someone who sees your partnership as a prison sentence. I could see our future dissolving. The wedding where I'd be the uptight bride who made him settle down. The marriage where every compromise would be painted as my controlling nature. The eventual divorce where I'd be the ex-wife who never understood him. I didn't comment on his post, didn't text him. Instead, I got dressed, drove to the venue, and canceled our walkthrough appointment. Then I called my sister. "Nicole, can you meet me for coffee? I need to talk." My mother's reaction was predictable when I called her later. "Are you sure you can't work it out? What about all the deposits?" My father more practical. "Better to find out now than after you're married." Nicole just hugged me and said, "I never liked him anyway." The venue deposit alone was $3,000. The save the dates we'd already ordered, another $400. I calculated we'd lost about $5,000 in wedding expenses, but compared to what divorce would have cost later, it felt like a bargain. By Saturday afternoon, I'd made my decision. I opened Facebook, navigated to my profile, and changed my relationship status from engaged to single. Then I turned off my phone and went for a long walk around the neighborhood we'd planned to build our life in. When I turned my phone back on Sunday morning, it was a war zone. 47 missed calls, 200 plus texts. The progression was almost comical. "Babe, what's wrong? Why did you change your status?" "This isn't funny. Change it back." "I'm literally in the middle of nowhere. You can't do this to me while I'm here. Please answer me. People are asking questions." "You're being so immature right now. Chad says you're manipulating me, and I'm starting to see it." My favorite was from Chad himself. "Melissa, whatever game you're playing, you're hurting a good man. Some of us are trying to help Brandon grow, but you seem determined to keep him small." Keep him small. Right. I turned my phone off again. I spent Sunday cleaning out the spare room that had become our wedding planning headquarters, boxed up the wedding magazines, returned the dress shopping appointments to my calendar as canceled, and put our couples therapy books in the donation pile. Sunday evening, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called my college friend Ashley and asked if she wanted to grab dinner during the week. Ashley, who'd always been politely skeptical of Brandon, saying things like, "He seems nice, but does he really see you?" I'd been defensive then. Now her words felt prophetic. "Is this really happening?" Ashley asked when I told her. "You're free?" "I'm free." "How's Tuesday? I know this great wine bar in the village." While Brandon was figuring out how to explain his relationship status change to his camping buddy, I was making plans for my first girls' night in months. Tuesday was a revelation. Ashley was funny, successful, and asked me questions about things that had nothing to do with Brandon. We talked about work, books, travel plans I'd put on hold for wedding planning. Around 9 p.m., I turned my phone on to check in with Nicole. 31 missed calls from Brandon. I didn't check the texts, but I did check Facebook. He'd deleted the camping post. His status now showed "It's complicated" with some cryptic post about working through challenges with someone you love. The audacity. He wanted space while blowing up my phone. Ashley noticed the look on my face. "Bad breakup stuff?" "Something like that." "Want to talk about it?" "Not really. Is that weird?" She smiled. Nope. Want to get dessert somewhere else? We ended up at this 24-hour diner, sharing chocolate cake and talking about everything except Brandon until midnight. When I finally got home, his car was in the driveway. He was sitting on the porch steps in his camping clothes, looking exhausted and defeated. "You ignored me for 3 days," he said. "You went camping after I asked you not to." "I came back early." "Because I changed my relationship status, not because you respected me enough to stay." He started getting emotional. "Where were you tonight?" "Out. With a friend?" "What friend? Which friend?" The entitlement. Even after everything, he thought he had the right to interrogate me. "It doesn't matter, Brandon. We're not together anymore." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "You can't be serious. We live together. We have a mortgage. You can't just—" "Actually, I can. The house is in my name. I've been paying the mortgage alone for 6 months since you decided you needed to find yourself. You can stay in the guest room for 30 days to figure out your next move, but after that, you need to leave." "You've been planning this," he whispered. "No, Brandon. I've been ignoring this. There's a difference." The next month was tense but clarifying. Brandon tried every manipulation technique in the book: tears, anger, promises to work on himself, even bringing Chad around to mediate our issues. That last one backfired spectacularly. Chad showed up at our house on a Thursday evening, uninvited, ready to have a real conversation about my pattern of control issues. He'd brought notes, actual notes about examples of my controlling behavior, like asking Brandon to text when he'd be home late and wanting to discuss major purchases before making them. "Melissa," Chad said, settling into my kitchen like he belonged there, "Brandon's shared some concerns about the dynamic in your relationship. As someone who's been through a toxic marriage, I can see the signs." "The signs?" "The isolation from friends, the constant checking in, the guilt trips about normal guy activities." I looked at Brandon, who was staring at his hands. "Is this what you think?" Chad's helped me see some patterns." Chad leaned forward like a discount therapist. "Brandon's told me how you react when he wants time with his friends, how you make him feel guilty for having interests outside the relationship. That's textbook emotional manipulation." That's when something clicked. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Chad, tell me more about these patterns you've identified." For the next 10 minutes, Chad laid out his entire philosophy about how modern women use emotional manipulation to control men, how asking for communication is suffocating, how wanting quality time together is codependent, how planning a future together is trapping someone. It was toxic masculinity disguised as therapy speak, and Brandon was nodding along like it was gospel. "Thank you," I said when Chad finished. "That was very enlightening." The next morning, I sent the recording to Chad's ex-wife, Laura. I'd found her through mutual friends after some light internet detective work. Turns out, Chad had been bad-mouthing her to anyone who'd listen, claiming she was crazy and controlling during their marriage. Laura called me within an hour. "Oh my God," she said. "This is exactly what he did to me. He convinced me that wanting basic respect in a relationship was emotional abuse. He had our marriage counselor believing I was the problem." We met for coffee that weekend. Laura was smart, successful, and had been through hell during her marriage to Chad. He'd systematically isolated her from her friends, convinced her that her career expectations were selfish, and made her feel crazy for wanting normal relationship boundaries. "He's doing the same thing to Brandon that he did to me," she said. "Except now Brandon's the weapon and you're the target." Laura had evidence. Screenshots of Chad bragging to his guy friends about helping married friends see how trapped they were. His dating app profiles where he listed relationship coach as a hobby. Even his LinkedIn, where he'd started posting about men's empowerment and breaking free from societal expectations. "He gets off on destroying other people's relationships," Laura said. "Makes him feel powerful." That's when we came up with a plan. The best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation. It's letting people create their own consequences. Laura and I didn't expose Chad's manipulation tactics publicly. Instead, we documented everything and shared it with the right people at the right time. See, Chad had been using his relationship coaching persona to hit on recently separated women in our social circle. He was positioning himself as the wise divorced guy who could help them rediscover their authentic selves after getting out of toxic relationships. Classic predator behavior. When 3 different women came forward with stories about Chad's inappropriate behavior, Laura compiled a detailed report for their mutual friend group. Not accusations, just documented patterns and testimonials from his actual victims. Chad's social circle dried up overnight. Turns out, even his bros didn't want to associate with a guy who manipulated vulnerable women. Without Chad's constant reinforcement, Brandon started questioning the narrative. He began seeing how isolated he'd become, how he'd started treating our relationship like an adversary instead of a partnership. But by then, it was too late for us. I'd spent the month rediscovering who I was outside our relationship. I'd reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the wedding planning madness. Started taking that pottery class I'd always wanted to try. Even went on a few dates, nothing serious, just reminders that I was interesting and valuable beyond my role as Brandon's fiancé. When Brandon finally approached me for a real conversation, free from Chad's influence, I was already emotionally moved on. "I see it now," he said. We were sitting in our kitchen, my kitchen, on a Sunday morning in October. "Chad was poisoning me against you, making me think that normal relationship expectations were restrictions. I know. I was an idiot. I threw away the best thing in my life because some divorced guy convinced me I was missing out on something. I know." He looked surprised. "You're not even angry." I was angry. Now I'm just relieved. Relieved that I found out who you really are before we got married, before we had kids, before I wasted more years trying to convince you that I'm worth basic respect. He started crying then. "I want to come home. This isn't your home anymore, Brandon. It's mine. You chose adventure over partnership. You chose Chad's toxic philosophy over what we built together. You chose to humiliate me publicly instead of having an adult conversation about your concerns. I'll do anything. Therapy, cut contact with Chad, whatever you want. I want you to learn from this, just not with me." I meant it. The version of Brandon who could be so easily manipulated into abandoning our relationship wasn't someone I wanted to build a life with. And the version of me who would have begged him to stay, who would have compromised my self-respect to save us, was someone I was proud to leave behind. Brandon moved out 2 weeks later. He found a furnished apartment near his brother's place, took only what was actually his, and left quietly. No drama, no final showdown. Just the sad conclusion of what had once felt like forever. Our mutual friends handled the split with typical adult awkwardness. Some reached out to check on me, others went radio silent, probably unsure how to navigate the social politics of a broken engagement. The ones who mattered showed up. The ones who didn't revealed their true priorities. My book club friends were amazing. Sarah brought wine and helped me pack up Brandon's remaining belongings. Jennifer organized a girls' weekend to the spa resort we'd always talked about visiting. Even my coworker Michelle, who barely knew the details, made sure I wasn't eating lunch alone during those first few rough weeks. The neighborhood gossip was exactly what you'd expect. Mrs. Patterson from across the street made pointed comments about young people today not understanding commitment. The couple next door, who'd been planning to double date with us, suddenly became very interested in their lawn maintenance whenever I walked by. But there were surprises too. My elderly neighbor Harold, whose wife had passed away the year before, brought me homemade soup and said quietly, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over." His words meant more than all the social media support combined. Work became my sanctuary. Without the constant stress of relationship drama, I found my focus returning. The promotion I'd been working toward for months suddenly felt achievable. My creativity flourished when I wasn't spending mental energy managing someone else's emotional instability. 3 months after Brandon left, I got the call. Senior Marketing Director, 20% salary increase, my own team. Everything I'd been building toward while trying to balance wedding planning and relationship maintenance. It's been 4 months since Brandon moved out. He's in therapy now, and from what I hear through mutual friends, he's doing the work to understand how he got so lost. Chad moved to another state after his social circle collapsed, apparently to start fresh somewhere new. I've been thriving, got promoted at work. Turns out I'm much more focused without constant relationship drama. My house feels peaceful instead of tense. I've been dating casually, taking my time to understand what I really want in a partner. Last month, Brandon texted asking if we could grab coffee. Not to get back together, but to apologize properly and make amends. I agreed, curious to see who he'd become without toxic influences. He looked different, clearer, maybe, less defensive. "I've been in therapy for 3 months," he said, "learning about how manipulation works, how I let someone else's agenda override my own judgment." "Good for you." "I hurt you, badly, and I humiliated you publicly while convincing myself you were the problem." "Yes, you did." He took a breath. "I'm not asking for another chance. I know that ship has sailed, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. What we had was real, and I destroyed it because I was too weak to resist someone telling me what I wanted to hear. It was a good apology, specific, accountable, without any hidden agenda for reconciliation." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate you saying that." "Are you happy?" he asked. I thought about it. My quiet house with space for pottery projects. The book club Nicole and I started. The weekend trip to Vermont I'd booked just because I wanted to see fall leaves. The text thread with Ashley where we planned girls' trips instead of wedding logistics. "Yeah," I said, "I really am." And I meant it. The dating world at 36 is different than I remembered, but not in bad ways. I know what I want now. I know what red flags look like. I know the difference between someone who sees my standards as goals to meet versus obstacles to overcome. There was David, the architect who was charming until he started criticizing my expensive grocery choices, gone after 2 dates. Michael, the teacher who seemed perfect until he mentioned his ex-wife was crazy and took everything. Red flag central, blocked. And then there was James, who I met at a pottery class. Quiet, thoughtful, genuinely curious about my work and my goals. When I mentioned my recent engagement ending, he simply said, "That must have been difficult," and changed the subject. No probing, no attempts to position himself as the solution to my problems. We've been seeing each other for 6 weeks. Nothing serious yet, but promising in ways that feel entirely different from anything I experienced with Brandon. James asks questions and listens to the answers. He makes plans and keeps them. When I set boundaries, he respects them without making me justify why they exist. The pottery class has become my favorite part of the week. There's something meditative about working with clay, shaping something beautiful from raw material with patience and steady hands. My instructor, Maria, says I have good instincts for the craft. "You don't try to force the clay," she told me last week. "You work with its natural properties. That's the secret to creating something that lasts." I like the metaphor. Nicole and I have grown closer through all this. She's become my sounding board, my reality check, my partner in navigating the strange world of being suddenly single after 5 years of coupledom. She helped me redecorate the spare room that had been Brandon's office, turning it into a proper guest room where she stays when she visits from the city. "You know what I love most about this whole situation?" she said during one of her visits. "What?" "You didn't try to change yourself to save a relationship that wasn't worth saving. You changed your circumstances instead." The extended family has mostly adjusted to the new reality. My grandmother, 89 and sharp as ever, pulled me aside at my cousin's birthday party last month. "I never liked that boy," she whispered conspiratorially. "Too weak. A strong woman needs a partner, not a project. Grandma wisdom is the best wisdom." My social circle has shifted and settled in interesting ways. Some couple friends drifted away, probably uncomfortable with my newly single status threatening their worldview about relationship permanence. Others stepped up in ways I hadn't expected. Sarah and her husband Mark started including me in their dinner parties, treating me as a complete person rather than half of a missing equation. The wedding vendor cancellations were surprisingly therapeutic. Each phone call felt like closing a door that had been hanging open. The florist was understanding. The photographer offered a discount if I ever needed services again. The caterer was a bit pushy about their no refund policy until I mentioned the circumstances, then suddenly found some flexibility. My wedding dress is still hanging in the closet. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Sell it, donate it, save it for some hypothetical future I can't imagine yet. For now, it's just there, a reminder of a path not taken. The funny thing about betrayal is that it teaches you what you're actually willing to accept. I learned that I'd rather be alone than with someone who sees my standards as obstacles. Brandon learned that following toxic advice from broken people leads to broken outcomes. Chad learned that consequences eventually catch up, no matter how far you run. And somewhere in all this mess, I learned that changing your relationship status to single isn't giving up on love. Sometimes it's the first step toward loving yourself enough to demand better. These days, when people ask me about dating at 36, I tell them the truth. I'd rather build something real with someone who chooses me every day than cling to something that requires me to shrink myself to fit. Brandon's out there somewhere, hopefully learning the same lesson. But that's not my circus anymore. My pottery instructor says I have good hands for this kind of work. Steady, patient, able to shape something beautiful from raw material. I like the metaphor.